You're listening to Lords of Thunder podcast with Alpha Omega Sin and Happy Console Gamer.
Welcome, one and all, to the Lords of Thunder podcast. It is I, the mighty, incomparable Alpha Omega Sin, joined by...
joined by me! You sounded like a Viking coming in there. I like that. That's pretty awesome.
I had to make it sound pretty epic because we're going to have a very special episode where we get to talk about the blast processing 16-bit juggernaut, the system that did what Nintendo don't. SEGA!
SEGA? I've never heard of SEGA. Who are they?
Sega's this one company that made a lot of amazing games, but, nowadays you wouldn't fucking know that, but they... naturally a big part of both of our lives and many people out there listening, so I thought, this would just be a pretty rockin' little episode.
It's going to be fun to talk about the beginnings of SEGA, especially when we look at them now. It's more like a barren wasteland now, but we're going to go back to the frontier days of when, they were bringing out brand new franchises left, right, and center. Every fucking day, it was a brand new franchise that was a big hit. I mean, they could do no wrong in the 80s and 90s. They really couldn't. Well, they had a couple of stumbles, but we'll get to that too.
It was one of those things. If you were a fan of arcade games, for example, and you got to go to arcades, which, man, I wish that they were still active right now. It was hard to not know who Sega was because they were kind of the most badass companies out there who had the arcade scene locked down. I
think I really came to know them it must have been 87. I went to Hawaii. My parents, were nice enough to take me to Hawaii, and we're walking around on an evening, and it was so magical that we just went around a corner, and then boom, we were in this arcade. But it was just like, as a kid, it was just like the most magical place ever, because like all they had was like, if you can imagine. They had this huge altered beast, like on a huge TV. I mean, I'd never seen anything like that as a kid. And they had like a sit-down outrun machine that's moving and all this kinds of stuff. And I was like, holy crap! Like all you'd see is the Sega name, and you knew that there was this cool Japanese company making these arcade games. And I was in absolute bliss. I was like, all night playing these games. And Altered Beast was like the coolest shit I'd ever seen. And there was crowds of people around the machines at the time. It was really exciting. And that was the first time I really started to know about Sega. Was their arcade division. And everybody's going to remember that. They didn't just come out with the consoles. They had this huge presence in the arcades.
And the neat thing about it was, for back then, their arcade machines, stuff like Afterburner and Outrun, they looked a million times better than anything else you were looking at, because they were so fast, and they would all the graphics were scaling, and it gave you actual depth. You're playing through Outrun, and it's these branching paths, and you're driving around. And was it the Testarossa? Is that the car?
Yeah, the red car.
And you got your chick with you, and you're driving down all these crazy ass roads, and you're trying to go and beat the time limit. I sucked ass at the game, truth be told. I didn't get good at it until the consoles, but you still want to play, and it just looked cool. And Afterburner was just nuts. You're dodging fucking missiles, and it's great. Yeah,
just the like first person types of games. And another great first person game was Space Harrier.
Oh, my God,
I remember, get ready, and it was just like, holy shit, this is like virtual reality. It was a big fucking deal, and the sit down machine for that was also amazing. I always remember that Space Harrier, big one.
I always loved the fact that with a lot of arcade games, they would have different variants of them. They'd have those stand-up versions, and then they'd have the sit-down versions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, the sit-down versions of so many arcade machines, every single company, Sega especially, would do such a good job of making you feel like you were closed off from everything else, and you were really there. Like, you were into the game that much more because there was nothing to go and detract your attention and, make it teeter off somewhere else. It was so damn cool.
Hang on, the cycle game, like we lean back and forth. That was something else. Like these are really great games. They were great games, and that's why everybody's so upset. Going, oh man, they always remember the great Sega arcade days and what they did back then and the innovations that they did. With Yu Suzuki, it was amazing.
Well, one of the things I didn't fully grasp or appreciate whenever I was very young. Now, as a full-grown man, I absolutely can. But they did an amazing job, damn near like every single time, with adapting their arcade games to consoles.
Oh God, yeah. So where did you were seeing some arcade games as you were younger? Where was your first like Sega console experience? What was the next thing after the arcade games for you?
Well, for me, it was the Genesis, because we like, and for anybody out there over in Europe or Australia, the Mega Drive, but the Genesis was the first thing that we ever had, and the funny story behind that is my brother, he had this friend whose name was Spaceman, and Spaceman was one of the craziest people, very nice guy, but just would do the craziest stuff in the entire world. And he had robbed some kind of place, and the Sega Genesis and a whole bunch of games was part of that.
Wow!
And he sold it to my brother, and keep in mind, this was 1991.
Wow!
Okay, so a Sega Genesis in a stack of games. I'm talking like Sonic the Hedgehog and Streets of Rage and Altered Beast. That whole shebang. All those games. And some other ones, Ghouls and Ghosts too.
Very good.
All that for $50.
Wow!
And for even nowadays, that's
amazing.
What
a steal!
But he was like, yeah. So that was my first taste for it, and I was a little kid, so first thing I wanted to play was Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
And oh my God, when the only thing that you've played at the time was your 8-bit Nintendo, and then you see the Sega Genesis, you feel like you've been swept away to an entirely new world. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah, see, the funny thing is, you started with the Genesis, I started with the Master System, and what was the first time I'd ever seen a Master System was down the road. My friends. It's an old story. I'm not going to go into all the details about it. We'd be here all day, but they had one. I went down, saw it. It blew my fucking mind. Seeing Phantasy Star and all that, and that was the first time I saw RPGs, console RPGs, on a home console. That was the very first time I saw that.
And Phantasy Star was, from a technical standpoint, Phantasy Star was the shit. Like, man, was it cool.
It was light years ahead of anything I'd ever seen. Everybody listening who wasn't there for this time, you have to realize you'd never seen anything like this, and you'd also never seen a console RPG, JRPG. And I should say that it was the very first console JRPG. I was like, in North America, I was like, holy, look, there's anime style characters. I'm like, this is fucking off the charts, man. And oh my God, you got like 3D dungeons, and you can buy weapons and fight monsters. I mean, it was a dream come true for me at that time. And they didn't stop there. They had Miracle Warriors, Ys, King's Quest. They just bought every fucking RPG for the goddamn system. And we were all there all summer. It was the best summer ever.
So would you say that was definitely like one of the major reasons why you got so much into the genre, was thanks to that?
Yeah, well, I was already, we talked about Dungeons and Dragons before. Playing D&D was really cool, but I guess it was I was longing for escapism. I was longing to get the fuck out of my, grade 7, grade 8 life, going into high school. It was kind of a scary transition, and I wanted some escape from that. And so D&D was giving me that. But at times, D&D was very annoying because I was playing with a bunch of younger guys my age, and they were always arguing about the rules, and we weren't doing as much exploration and fun things. We were arguing all the time, and I didn't want to be a part of that. So I wanted an experience that was away from that, an experience where it's just me. I could just have my own RPG adventure on my own, and that's what Phantasy Star was like giving me, or like at least showing to me. I didn't have it at that time. It was my friends down the street. We were there every fucking day in the summer. I mean, it was the best nerd basement adventure summer I could ever have dreamed of or wanted or had since. I mean, it's still one of my favorite summers, 1987, 88, and all that. So anyways, that was a great experience. And then I played games, and I started realizing some other friends had a Master System, and I didn't get one for a couple of years later. I ended up getting Phantasy Star Sloppy Seconds, Sloppy Seconds, Miracle War, but I was happy to get them. I happily fucking sucked and licked that motherfucker up and down. I didn't give a shit. I was just glad to fucking get it finally.
The thing that I'd love to is whenever like you're younger and you don't have shit for money at all, you can't go and like we can now and work the corners, and make our money the good old fashioned way with skinned knees and stuff. But whenever you're a kid, you're always going to your friends' houses and playing their games, and sometimes that's one of the only reasons you go to your buddy's house is just to play video games.
Well, hey, so what's funny about that is that me and my friend Andrew went over there that first day, and they showed us Phantasy Star, and it was a basement full of nerdy kids in our neighborhood, and me and Andrew was like, oh my fucking god, I'll never forget looking over at him, his facial reaction, his jaw was quite literally on the ground, and he's just like, his eyes are wide open, and we both like, look at each other, oh my god, this is like the coming of Christ or something. You know what I mean? Like, this was what it was for us. But what was so fucking hilarious is the next morning, I got up at like 9 o'clock, early riser in the summer, you know what I mean? And I go down, I bike down to my friend's place down the street, the Cato's, who had this, Master System. And I go around the back and I knock on the window, and fucking Andrew's already fucking in there. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing here? He's like, oh, I've been here since 8. And I'm like, you're just using these people to play their fucking games. And I knew that. It was the funniest shit ever. I always just thought, man, he's like an addict too. He's just like an addict to it. So that was funny. I'll never forget Andrew being over there before I was even there. I was mad he was there. That's just a classic memory. But anyways, yeah, and there was a Cato's down the street who also got a Genesis before me, and I got to try everything over there. What an amazing machine the Genesis was. Just seeing ghouls, as you were saying, ghouls and ghosts. When you first saw that.
That was mind blowing. What's weird is for me, I played Ghouls and Ghosts before I played Ghosts and Goblins.
Really?
And for a lot of people, it'll be like, I can't believe that. Like, I never played in the arcade. I'd never even seen it in the arcade. And I knew that it existed on NES, but that was all. Yeah. I'd never gotten to try it myself. So that was the first time I got to play it. And I still feel today that I was almost spoiled by that.
Oh, you would have been going back afterwards. I experienced the Ghosts and Goblins in a 7-Eleven of all things, and it was the hardest game. I watched other people play. I was like, I suck at this game. I was watching older kids play it, but when I saw Ghouls and Ghosts, I'm like, oh shit, what a jump! But obviously that's a Capcom game, but it was on a Genesis, and what an arcade conversion is. Alpha was talking about earlier, like they were doing really good arcade experiences at home. Like this was the first time that you'd seen. Like I remember when the first time I got a Genesis, the Christmas morning, and I put in Last Battle, which is like Fist of the North Star, and I'm looking at Hawktu walking side view, and I'm like, holy shit, look at this! Like this is an arcade game. The character's huge on the screen, and never mind the big buttons. That controller. When I took that fucking controller out, I needed a goddamn crane to take that thing out the first time. I couldn't believe how big it was.
Dude, a lot of people forget the original 3-button Sega Genesis controller is a beast. Like, that thing, I mean, I always throw jokes around about the fact that you're basically going to have a fucking hernia from picking up the original Xbox controller. Yeah, but the original Genesis controller, especially for the time, it looks like it could have swallowed the NES controller and asked for seconds.
Yeah.
Like, it was so goddamn big, and it was just, but the thing that was nice about it was a really smooth controller.
Mm-hmm.
It was rounded, and it felt comfortable.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I thought was cool about it. You know, whenever I'm sitting there beating the shit out of zombies in Altered Beast, you know, and walking around and welcome to your doom, and doing that kind of thing, you know, I was fine with that. But naturally, I'm always going to swear up and down the 6-button controller is the way to go.
And people can laugh at Altered Beast now, and I know a lot of people do. It's become a bit of a joke type of game, but I'm telling you, Christmas morning, that was the pack-in game. When I put in Altered Beast, I was like, oh my god, again? Remember, I'm coming from that kid who was in 87 seeing Altered Beast on this gigantic big screen TV monitor thing, and all of a sudden I got that game at home, and I was like, oh, you know, I was having that religious experience again at home, but I didn't have to put in any quarters. It was mine. But the game was too short. I remember I beat it like the first couple of times I played, I'm like, oh, thank God I got some other games.
Well, the thing is with Altered Beast, a lot of the old school arcade games, they weren't extremely lengthy, but what they made up for in overall game length, they had a punishing difficulty.
Yeah.
And just did not give a fuck who you were or what you were. They were just like, I hope you've brought at least $10 in change because you might get halfway through. Yeah. And Altered Beast, you know, I can to this day can do a single run on the game and be just fine. But it's for back then, you know, like those transformation sequences during each stage when you're turning into a different monster, that, like, every time it was happening, I was like, man, that's like the coolest shit ever, because it reminds you of the times when you're watching, you know, like Power Rangers or something, where they go into the transformation sequence, and you're like, oh, that's so cool! And Altered Beast was doing that stuff on our game system, and we were this big hulking badass monster that's like maybe a flying dragon shooting lightning everywhere, or a wolf that's able to shoot out all this shit and do these little charge attacks and stuff, and it was so fucking awesome.
Yeah, but before that, you were a gigantic muscular figure running around in a thong.
Yeah. And remember, power up. And it's funny because your sprite gets much more muscular, and your head ends up looking like a grape sitting on top of a pumpkin. Yeah. And it's just, it looks comical after a while, but then eventually you get powerful enough to go into your Altered Beast transformation. And you want to know what? And this was something, it has nothing to do with the games, but I to this day still absolutely love the black grid design for the Sega Genesis clamshell artwork. I've always found that to be so damn cool looking.
Are you talking about like eSWAT and stuff like that?
Like all the original games, like a long time ago, you know, they'd have the artwork, but they'd have that black grid design that was wrapped around it on the case.
You're not talking about like you're not talking about the Master System.
No. Well, the Master System had the white grid design.
Yeah.
The Genesis and Mega Drive had the black grid looking one, and that was the first one that I got to see. But I always thought it looked cool because it stood out, you know, compared to everything else on a shelf. You know, it reminded me of like Konami on NES had the silver boxes, and Capcom, they would have those the purple boxes with the outline to it, and then the artwork right in the center, or the really old ones where it was that real retro Tron looking grid design that was real trippy looking. But I always liked the look.
I'm with you. It's where you have the logo and the artwork, and they were all uniform at the beginning. You're talking about,
yeah. See, I preferred that so much. Whenever they eventually switched over from the clamshell designs to the cardboard ones, where it was all red, I thought that just looked tacky and ugly.
Yeah, I still have the box of Fantasy Star 4, and it sucks. I wish I had it in one of those nice, beautiful, you know, plastic, cases. Again, not just a piece of cardboard.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. That stuff always bugged me. And you know what? missing out on a classic here. Want to bring up Golden Axe, the entire Golden Axe series. That man, that is awesome.
That's like for me. I got that the system and like Last Battle for Christmas that year, and then my birthday was always after Christmas, and it was all so cool. I'm like, we would go down the States and we went to Target, and I know that sounds funny, but Target was the place to go back in 1989 because honestly, the States got everything before us, everything, and it was a lot cheaper as well, and they had just a better selection. So Target then was a big deal. Target now, not at all. But I remember we went down to the video game section, and my parents were like, oh, okay, you like get 2 games for your birthday with your birthday money, and I'm like, okay, and I'm looking, and I'm like, fucking Alex Kidd. I'm like, I'll get that. Yeah. And then I'm like, Revenge of Shinobi. I'm like, and I don't even know if I think I read about it, but I didn't know about it. I'm like, oh yeah, Revenge of Shinobi. Fuck yeah, Shinobi. Fuck yeah, Shinobi. And we got that, and I went home, and then Alex Kidd wasn't a bad game. It wasn't unbelievable. It was pretty cool. But fucking Revenge of Shinobi. Little did I know I was about to play what would be a classic to me since 1989 till now. I still think the gameplay in there is fantastic. The music is excellent. Oh, by Yuzo Koshiro. I mean, just the level of design, the bosses, Spider-Man, Godzilla.
Yeah, I was gonna say, dude, they had fucking Batman and Godzilla in the game. That's awesome.
It was and Rambo as well, and the Terminator. Yep. I mean, it had fucking I'm like, this is the best game I've ever played.
And you want to know what? It was a prime example back then, especially, that they would go out of their way to make some of the craziest and coolest cover art for games that you would just want to pick up and turn around and see, like, on the back of it. Nowadays we look up gameplay footage and shit, but back then, if you didn't have a subscription to a magazine and weren't already well aware of this ahead of time, you knew fuck all.
Yeah.
So this was one of those things, like, all the Shinobi games had killer artwork on it, and the Golden Axe series, all of those had killer artwork. Streets of Rage, those had all of them you would pick up and you'd want to look at because it looked exciting.
What it was is exactly what you're talking about. They were all beautifully hand painted. Mm-hmm. I mean, beautiful, gorgeous pieces of artwork on their own, but coupled with games, they just like Forgotten Worlds, Elder Beast, Ghouls and Ghosts.
When we had talked about in D&D, if you were a fan of Dungeons and Dragons and saw the cover to the first 3 Golden Axe games, you'd want to own them because it would feel like you are playing out a section to a game. Like, you are now this warrior wearing nothing but a loincloth and a smile. And you're going out there kicking the living shit out of everything and summoning up, like, entire big things of flame and water and all sorts of shit, devastating enemies. And, oh my god, and Streets of Rage, we totally gotta talk about that.
It's so funny that, we do a Sega episode. It's so easy not to get off the Master System and Genesis and just stick there all day. You know? It's kind of crazy, yeah. Like, maybe we should just keep on talking about what we want to talk about and see where we go, because this is going to be like, I think it's going to be like multiple parts.
And you know what? I'm fine with that because the company's big enough for that. Well, let's see. So we had the Master System. You know what? Here, I didn't even say much about the Master System.
Yeah.
I'm kind of jealous that you were fortunate enough and lucky enough to experience it back then. I didn't get the Master System until my late teens, early 20s.
Right.
And because around here, I never saw it at all. Yeah. It just wasn't around, or I was just like, well, I have an NES, and I don't know anything else. But I'd never gone to see that. I went straight from Nintendo over to Sega Genesis. But, I keep going back. And, you had brought up that Phantasy Star and East games. If I got to see those when I was a kid, my brain would have fucking popped.
Mine did. And here's something that I've never been able to find, or ever being able to find, like, on YouTube or anything. I got up for school one morning, I think in 87, 88, and I got up, and I was eating my cereal, watching my Robotech or whatever it was, and there was a commercial advertising the Sega Master System and Phantasy Star, and I'm just like, blew my socks off. So I knew about it ahead of time, and I was telling everybody in the neighborhood about it from this commercial that I saw. And it was just like, travel to different planets, the ultimate fantasy role-playing game experience. I'm like, oh! It really was like that for me then, too. I was telling everybody about it, and then that's when those guys came back and surprised me. But what's interesting is what you're saying is that 20 kids in the neighborhood would have a Nintendo. 2 would have a Master System. It just wasn't big. It wasn't big enough. And it's not because they weren't in stores. They were. I could go to any store and they were in there. But it was always like Nintendo had built such a name. And people were like, get Nintendo, you can get this, you get this. Mario Brothers was the big one. That everybody's, I got to get that because for Mario Brothers. Oh, and Sega was, as a home console, was unproven. And they were like the weird uncle. You didn't know what to make of them. But when you sat and got molested by the weird uncle, you're like, hey, this guy ain't so bad.
Like, he said, sit on his lap, talk about the first thing that popped up. Now I'm in counseling.
Yeah, like we're playing with my Opa. It was wonderful. So fuck.
He promised me a glowworm when I was little. I didn't get exactly what I thought I was going to.
Oh, Jesus. That's
and now it hurts when I sit.
But
and you want to know what? Back onto the topic of Sega being the unproven company, it was interesting because a lot of people aren't aware, but Nintendo actually had a complete and utter monopoly over a lot of third-party companies back then. So it was extremely difficult for a company like Sega, for example, to come in and get any kind of support like that. So they had to kind of do their own thing, and luckily they were fucking talented as hell, so that was pretty easy. But Nintendo, they had Konami locked down, they had Capcom locked down, they had all these companies, they had Tecmo locked down, they had Hudson Soft locked down, and think about all the major franchises that started on Nintendo. And all the ones that started on Sega were basically made by Sega themselves.
Some of the bigger ones, yeah. And they were innovative, too. They had their 3D glasses, which were a big deal back then. And their light gun as well. They had a light gun games that were really excellent. The funny thing is, the graphics and sound, I don't give a shit what anybody says. I still think it's better than Nintendo.
Oh, it definitely is. The only thing about the sound, like, I think the sound on the Master System is better, but I feel that people utilize the sound chip in the NES better for music.
I'm with you on that. There's so many wonderful soundtracks on the NES. This is not a Master System is better than Nintendo, but I think it was, everybody went to Nintendo, and it's like, wait, the Master System is so worthy. In fact, it's really, really, like, yeah, it was really sad to see it never catch on. But there was something cool about it because it didn't catch on. It was niche. Yeah. It was kind of cultish in a way.
That's exactly why I dig a lot of... Well, hell, both of us. We kind of gravitate towards the unknown. The things that are kind of underground. The things that people haven't heard of. And not in like a hipster kind of way. We like to dig deep and find those gems that nobody knew about, those diamonds in the rough, when we're going and talking about some kind of games, if everybody's playing the biggest games out there, well, what about these games? I'm sure they're pretty good. Let's give them a shot. You already know everything about those big ones. And Sega was that company, and you know what? And that was an interesting time because Nintendo had revitalized the entire video game market, and Sega was coming in being the next big contender. They had the arcade scene locked down. They came in with the Master System. The Master System, still today, is big as hell over in Europe and in South America, and that's amazing.
Yeah, Brazil, it's massive, and it's just insane. And the Master System had a really big effect on Australia. And of course, all the Australians called it SEGA because there was one. So from what I heard, there was a commercial over there, and they're like introducing SEGA, the Master System, SEGA, and so everybody's like, "Oh, it's SEGA," because that's what the commercial was telling them, and this is before the internet. So everybody called it SEGA, and they still do. And it's not a bad thing, but it's interesting. It's a really funny topic. Yeah.
Well, let's see. So, with the Genesis, if we're going to go in chronological order, the Genesis got to go and live on a little bit with 2 additional add-ons.
Yeah, which were, like, okay, let's just, first of all, before we jump there, they had the power-based converter.
Yeah.
And it's just a little peripheral, but it's kind of how those meld together. So there's this power-based converter you could put on your Genesis, and you didn't need a Sega Master System anymore, because now you can just get those old games and put them in the power-based converter and play them on your Genesis, which, let me tell you, was a really welcome feature. That was... I love that machine. When it came out, I was like, wow.
Ever since I'd known about that, I had always wished that they would have built, instead of having like all the add-ons, to have like an all-in-one Genesis system.
Yeah.
Just did everything. Like, that'd be so cool. But the power-based converter, like, I actually have it sitting behind me up on the shelf.
Mine's in the other room on the shelf.
Yeah. Dude, it's amazing. Like, it... for anybody that... Because Master Systems aren't exactly common in most parts of where people live at, because it wasn't a huge-ass system. So having something like the power-based converter, I'm all for that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where they kind of, rubbed out the Master System and said, hey, all-in-one system here. And then, what's the next thing they introduced?
The Sega CD, I believe, came out before the 32X.
Yeah, that was a funny. I've always wanted to talk about this too. Is that I remember like I had the TurboGrafx, and the Sega CD hadn't come out yet, and I was down the road talking to a guy. His name was Dave Penfold, and he was a friend of me and Andrew's. He's I wouldn't even call him a friend of mine. He was a guy I fucking knew. And I remember I was telling him the excitement of playing Ys Books 1 and 2 and all this stuff. And he's like, yeah, that's fine. I'm really looking forward to the Sega CD. That's going to blow away the TurboGrafx CD. Yeah, it's got so many full motion video games and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, thank you for shitting on my parade, you fucking twat face. I remember being so annoyed at that guy. I was like, he wasn't like, oh, that's really cool, but, it's also the Sega CD's coming. He wasn't being cool about it. He said, fuck that TurboGrafx CD. And I was just like, there was already an underdog to begin with. I didn't need the nerd down the road bashing it, too. Fuck you. But, yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty. When I started to see some of the games, I was like,
just so you know, you probably had one of the rarest arguments ever for back then of the TurboGrafx CD versus the Sega CD.
And I'm going to do a video on it, actually, which is funny. Because
dude, I think that's an excellent idea. Because, dude, think about it. Most people are always like, Nintendo versus Sega. You never heard that kind of shit go down. Like, that's one of those, like, debates and arguments that it is, like, the low percentage chance of occurring. That's fucking cool.
It was funny, but do you know, I can be absolutely honest. I was a bit of a fanboy because I had my TurboGrafx CD and I'd invested in this and I had emotionally invested in it. And I was like, don't you dare talk bad about my girlfriend, the Sega CD, or sorry, the TurboGrafx with your Sega CD slut, And yeah, I didn't know what to think about. I was excited about the Sega CD when I started seeing all the Japanese games. But guess what? We didn't get hardly any of those.
Yeah.
We got a lot of full motion video games. I remember Sewer Shark and all the initial games that were coming out, Night Trap, but I was just like...
Night Crap.
It was just like, this is not what I want out of video games. Like, the full motion video was exciting, it was a different direction, but it was not why I was playing video games. I was playing video games for Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and all those reasons, and RPGs. I didn't need to kind of want... I didn't mind a bit of this full motion video stuff, but I didn't want all the games to be pretty much like that. And they felt like that was the majority that was coming out.
Well, the Sega CD always bummed me out because, like, I had no interest in it whenever I was younger because after the Genesis and all the other shit, I was looking at the Ultra 64 and the PlayStation as my next go-to systems.
Yeah.
And the Sega CD I was like, whatever. But, and nowadays, I'm constantly defending the system to detractors because they just assume that the system is bad and that it has nothing to offer whatsoever, and that is totally not the case. It is.
That's totally not the case.
A lot of really fantastic games. It's just, unfortunately, an add-on with more infamous and notorious shitty games like the FMV games, for example, that ended up getting most of the exposure and limelight, so everybody assumed that's all the system had.
Yeah, so we've talked about some of the shit. Let's talk about some of the good. Obviously, we're going to talk about, let's just put them out there. Snatcher, Sonic CD, Popful Mail, Dark Wizard,
Lunar 1 and 2.
Lunar 1 and 2. Thank you. They, to a lesser degree, but it's still, you know what I mean. Like, there was a lot of really cool types of games on there. Like, Jesus Christ, there was a lot of good stuff.
And this one particular game, it's called, what is it, Lords of Thunder, I think it's called.
Yeah, you have a copy and I don't.
Wait, you don't?
I don't know. I remember you telling me that you were looking for it, and I saw it on eBay, and I was like, "Oh, fuck it! Like, let's give this guy what he desires."
I'm going to have to find you a copy then.
Oh, I'm cool. I'm totally fine. You know, I'm on Google here because I didn't want to forget any, like the Keo Flying Squadron on Sega CD.
Dude, I mean, I never got to play that.
Neither did I. That's why I just saw. I was like, I should mention this because I don't have any experience with it.
Dude,
I know it's worth a fucking shitload of money now. That's all I know.
One big time game that, like, Snatcher's always the really big digital novel type game that everybody will talk about for a system, and rightfully so, because it's hands down the best damn game on that system. But
that's really cool. Yeah.
Rise of the Dragon, also just as noteworthy and very good. But
that was a PC game back then. Yeah,
they did a port to the Sega CD. It's actually better than the PC version, oddly. Wow. They added more to that version. That's why I always say, if you're going to get it, check that version out. And there's also the Space Adventure Cobra.
Right, we were talking about that. I think a week ago. Yeah.
Oh man. And I've only played it via a ROM because that was the only way to get a hold of it. But that plays just like Snatcher. And the anime is out there. If anybody ever wants to go and check that out, you totally should. Then there's also the fact that this looks good and it has good voice acting inside of it. And it's killer. And to think that the game's just sitting on the system completely unknown. It's made by Hudson Soft too. And it saddens me to think about some of these real badass games, and they had such low print runs. They've never had digital re-releases, and it's just, man, such a bummer.
Yeah, there's a lot of little gems on the machine, like Road Avenger. I fucking love that game. That's a great game too. It's a real classic game.
Anytime that somebody's like, there's no good games, I'm like, well, what about Final Fight CD? Everybody knows about Final Fight. Everybody knows that Final Fight games are really excellent. And for the longest time, that was like the only perfect version that you could get a hold of until they did the Final Fight version on PS3 and stuff, which was a really good port. And it was a really nice version. The music was really good. That was the big deal with that one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so there's no knocking. The Sega CD. In fact, actually, here's a little bit of something interesting: is that Phantasy Star 4 was originally supposed to come out on Sega CD. I shit you not, I did not know that.
Yeah, because then was it? Wait a second. Brain. Because this is off I'm remembering something from a long time ago. Yeah, because they were getting ready to put it on. It was going to be a big game, and then at the last minute they're like, no, because it died. That was right, and they just put it on a cartridge. That's why all the cinematics and stuff were over the top, and they had to make the game way bigger.
I remember Phantasy Star 4 being insanely expensive when it came out.
Yeah,
because
over $100, I think it's $100.
Yeah, over here it was $100 brand new retail, and a lot of us will complain about the $60 brand new retail price, which I still think is too expensive for a game. Yeah. But back then, just imagine going to a store wanting to play your the last installment officially within for the Genesis Fantasy Star games. $100 you would have to throw down. Like your wallet would turn inside out and want to kill itself.
But even the original Fantasy Star on the Master System was way up there. It was like an $80 game. Yeah, we're talking 87 and $80 game. That's extremely expensive. Yeah.
God damn, dude, that's
it was fucking worth it though.
Thinking about it, because we were talking about earlier, and we both had gotten Final Fantasy X, the HD version.
Yeah.
And that's that right there is what, $50-$60?
Yeah, then, I think it's about it cost me about $60 here. Yeah.
And thinking about, just comparing it to that, $80, $90, $100, that's when you get like that real sweet collector's edition or something. That's horrifying. Oh, man. And if you applied inflation throughout the entire years, holy shit, you'd be like, all right, so I'll just take out a bank loan or maybe get rid of a couple of these internal organs because I don't need this fucking kidney. That's fine. It can go away. Now I can go and pre-order the game. Hooray!
Yeah. For sure. It's funny. It boggles your mind, the prices back then, and that's some of the hurdles that when you ask your parents for a video game, they're like, "Go fuck yourself." You understood why. You don't like honestly. I remember when I went to see Fantasy Star for the first time. I went back home. I'm like, please, Mom and Dad, you gotta give me this Master System. It's the best thing ever to get Fantasy Star. Blah 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 blah. And they just went, no. I'm like, please, like, no. I'm like, fuck. And that was the end of that. And you know what I mean? I couldn't even argue with them. I'm like, damn. Oh, yeah, those sinking feelings when you're so excited about something, it's like, nope, you ain't getting it.
And you get video game blue-balled by your parents.
Well, do you know what I would do back then? This is something I've never talked about. This is so stupid, too. I did a lot of choose-your-own-adventure books by myself. I made them for myself. And I'd have to roll dice. So I'd say I want a game like Gold Velius, and I couldn't get it. I'd make my own Gold Velius. And I'd make my little flip book, and so like you'd have to roll like a 6-sided die. 1 to 2, you go to this page. 3 to 4, you go to this page. 5, 6, this page. And then I have little fighting monsters and stuff like that. I played games that way on my own because I know it sounds so fucking, but that's all you had back then.
I think that actually sounds amazing. Like, I'm not even gonna knock it and be like, "Oh man, that sounds like you're fucking retarded" or some shit like that. Crazy. No, that legitimately sounds cool as hell. That you actually not only had the imagination, but you were fucking smart enough and also nerdy enough to go and create this, and that makes you fucking cool. I think
it was funny. I'm telling you, I don't know what it was, but I was looking for escapism so badly. I think that initial knock into high school was a really scary, brand new change, and I was looking not to be there. And because I didn't do drugs, I didn't do any, you don't drink as a younger kid, so there's no real escape from dealing with fear and stuff, except for your imagination. And I was trying my damnedest to escape reality in any capacity known to mankind, even if I had to sit up all night making fake little flip books and my own RPGs to do so.
Do you by chance have any of that stuff still?
I do actually have that stuff still.
Dude, you have to fucking make a video like showcasing some of this, because that sounds fucking incredible, man.
Well, it's just I wonder how sustainable of a video it could be, how long of people's attention span. I'm like, that'll be a 4-minute video before people go fuck yourself.
The thing is, even if only a couple people want to check it out, just imagine, because that's even beyond nostalgia. That's part of your history personally as a gamer. And there's other people out there, if you go online, I've read people who wrote fanfics. I've seen people who've created an entire, role-playing adventures based around anime and video games and stuff. It's so what you did is not all that far-fetched to many people out there, and it might kind of spur ideas in others, or even just let other people kind of open up about some of the shit that they do with one of their favorite hobbies.
I'm going to write it down. Old RPG Yeah, it's what you did before the internet. It's honestly one of the things that will show my age. Is what you did when you didn't have anything. You didn't have any internet, and you had a bunch of books, and you had a Nintendo with about 4 games on it, and that was it. You even like movies. We didn't own movies because you rented them. To buy a movie was very, very expensive back then, and my parents never bought movies back then. Like. You didn't buy it, so you didn't have a lot of fucking entertainment. That's why comic books were so massive in the 80s too. Is that you read comic books? But anyways, we're getting off track here. Let's get back to the wonderful.
I was gonna say, well, we had talked about the good and bad of the Sega CD, so I guess we could go and segue on into the darkest depths known as the 32X.
That is something I'll be flat out. I'm always very honest. I never got into. I never bought one. It just wasn't for me, and I knew that. Because the Sega, the Sega CD was one weird thing, but you'll have to take this away because I honestly I'm not an expert in the field of the 32X, nor do I want to be too much so.
I was going to say, to be honest, the 32X doesn't really have a lot of games to begin with, and it also doesn't have a lot of quality games on top of that. It was such an unnecessary thing. I don't even know how else to describe it. Like, for a while, Sega wanted to make its own standalone system called the Neptune.
That's right.
And they didn't do anything with that. They had the Sega Saturn coming out, so the redundancy of this system was even more apparent to anybody who was like, well, I'm going to be jumping into the next gen. But they did put out a couple good games on it, so I'll at least be able to let people know that not everything's on it is shit. There's a very, very good version of Afterburner on it. I mean, absolutely excellent. It like, if you played Afterburner in the arcade or even played on the Genesis/Mega Drive, then this is one of the premier versions you want to get, unless you get the version on Sega Saturn, which is definitely better. Let's see. Space Harrier is also good. You'd like Space Harrier, so
yeah, for sure. Another
Space Harrier. They did a good job.
Yeah, but it was like so many years later. It's like, oh, another version of Space Harrier.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a lot of the good games on the 32X were just ports of previous games.
Yeah.
Trying to think what Doom. They had a good version of Doom on there, but there's infinitely better versions out there that you can get. But if you have a 32X and are trying to play something good, and probably the most famous game on it is Knuckles Chaotix.
Yes, I know that one.
Okay, Knuckles Chaotix. I've played it quite a few times, and I couldn't get into the game personally. Some people really like the game and will say, you just gotta, just give it a chance. There's, it's got a different control scheme compared to the rest of the Sonic the Hedgehog games, because usually it's just run fast and platforming. Whereas this has like this whole rubber banding thing, and I think it started with a game called Sonic Crackers, I think it was called. So, but the 32X, it's got some other good games like Star Wars Arcade and let's see, Mortal Kombat, Metalhead. There's other shit out there, but unfortunately, it is literally just a mushroom-shaped turd on top of your Genesis, and you're better off just sticking with the Sega CD. You'll be fine, or get a Sega CDX, which is the best thing in the entire world.
And I do have one.
Dude, those things are awesome, and they're built like fucking tanks.
Man, it was nice. I sold most of my collection to buy one, which was the retarded thing I did. But so go on.
I was gonna say, when did you get it?
Oh, I got it for Lunar. I did a big video where I talked about selling most of my collection to be able to buy a Sega CDX, because I wanted to get Lunar and some of the RPGs that were coming out, and don't ask me why. I didn't have the side system. I just went straight into 32X.
Well, when did you get it?
I must have been... I was 20. So fuck me. Jesus, I'm 41 now, minus 21. Oh, you're making me do mathematics. It's a while ago. I'm just doing it here. I'm just gonna figure this out.
Well, see, I was curious because I wasn't sure if it was something recent or, you know, this was like a long ass time ago. But dude, it's kind of
1994.
See, that again, I think that's kind of badass that you had it since back then. I didn't get mine until early 2000s from a fucking thrift store.
Yeah, no, honestly, like it's so funny that I just said to you that I don't know anything about the 32X. That is correct, but at the time, I knew what it was all about, and I just was like, knowing what the Sega CD is. We were waiting for it to get good, and that we're waiting for that, and then all of a sudden they introduced this other thing.
Yeah,
it's like, oh no, and the Star Wars and all that stuff was like, no, I don't want to jump. I don't want any of these games, and I didn't really. None of those games were a system seller, so I'm like,
it was weird because they didn't even tap the full potential of the CD system yet.
Yeah,
and they're already like pushing out other systems and add-ons and stuff. I'm like, just calm the fuck down. You don't need all this extra shit. I'm quite content with playing something like Soulstar or Sylphid or some shit. Yeah. Like, just leave me a couple minutes just to fucking play this, and then they put that out, and then right after that, put out the Sega Saturn, and they released that early.
We're getting into it. So what had happened, and honestly, for me being there while it was happening, it was a state of confusion, and you knew the company was confused, and you didn't feel, I don't know, you felt very unsure about them. That's how you felt. Where Nintendo just went straight to the Super Nintendo. You know what I mean? No fucking around. Where Sega was doing this weird shit, like, okay, so here's a Sega CD, but we're not going to fully do that. And remember one thing, I already have a CD machine at the time, which was a big fucking deal. At the TurboGrafx, it's like, well, I really want the Genesis CD, but I got to wait for more games. And then more games came out, then it was okay to do that. But it's like, I can't keep buying more and more stuff. It was getting stupid. I just want to, as you said, be content with what I had. So Sega was getting very confusing. We didn't know what was going on with them. And then, boom, they introduced the Sega Saturn, and everything else was gone. And I'm like, thank God I didn't get on the Sega 32X at that point. Even though I did have a Sega CDX, I don't have one 32X game. Nor will I ever. I just don't care. I just don't give a shit. I honestly, I don't care. I didn't care then, and I don't care now. There's no game that I must have on that, for me personally, for the 32X. And then we get into the Sega Saturn, and I did not, again, jump on board. And I'm the guy who had a religious experience with the Master System, with the Genesis. Sega CD started throwing me off a little bit. 32X threw me off the fucking side. And then the Saturn, I was like, I'm not buying into this yet. I'm not trusting these guys. And rightfully so, but a lot of good stuff came out on the Saturn. A lot of good stuff. Rob, see, and this is where you live vicariously through your friends, Rob's family had one. And so I would go over there and experience all the games over there. I never had to buy one. And I only maybe about 10 years ago, finally got a Japanese Saturn. I don't have an American one. Still don't.
Well, aren't we fucking fancy? And me with my dirty American one. Ew.
Yeah. So what was your experience with the Saturn then?
Oh, man. People are going to fucking swear up and down I'm the worst person ever. And it's weird because it's completely different now. But I did nothing but mock the Saturn whenever it came out because I had PlayStation.
Oh, what a guy.
Dude, it was one of those things I'd looked at it and was like, I don't give a shit about any of this stuff and blah, blah. I don't care about, your racing games, your arcade games. I've got RPGs. And that's all I cared about. I was like, I have a PlayStation 1 and it has RPGs. More RPGs than I know what the fuck to do with. Wow. And I was a fucking cunt about it. I really was. But I was, I was a young teenager. I forget how old I was even when it came out. Let's see, PS1 came out in 95, so I was pretty fucking young. I was in middle school, or just starting middle school.
I was 23.
But it was, oh my god, dude. It was, the Saturn came out, and admittedly, it actually had games on it that I wanted, but I've already had a PlayStation, and I had a Nintendo 64, and there was no way I was convincing my parents and getting me a third system. I had zero friends who had a Sega Saturn. Zero. Yeah. None of them had one. And
Rob's family was the only one who had one. I didn't know anybody else who had one either. Nobody. You know why? Because it was so expensive. It was really a lot of money. And you couldn't justify it. You just couldn't. And I was an addict. I was a video game addict. Even I can say to my parents, I never said, hey, parents, do you want to get me a Saturn? Didn't even bother because it was too expensive.
And it's what's weird about it is, like, going back now, the Sega Saturn, I find nothing but amazing games on.
There's a lot of good stuff on it. Yeah.
It's crazy, and I have a bunch, at least like a bunch to me, a bunch of import games for the Saturn, because if you're ever going to import for a system, the Sega Saturn is a definite go-to system.
Oh,
that and the PC Engine. Holy shit.
Yeah. So many hidden gems on there. So many Japanese-only RPGs and stuff. It's just insane.
Dude, yeah. I would... the top one that I wanted of all time, as a matter of fact, I could get rid of all of them and just keep the one and be content. And that was the Castlevania Symphony of Night for the Sega Saturn.
Yes.
That was important.
Yeah, that's a really cool one. That's obviously something that we never got, like usual.
Oh, dude, I was always bummed out because that version of it had so much extra stuff in it. Yeah. And that's why I wanted it, because I was such a fan, am such a fan of the game, that I was like, I'm more than fine with going and paying money to get the same exact game just so that I can play through this little extra stuff and fight those extra bosses and get these extra familiars and shit. But, when the system came out, the one thing I remember distinctly about the Saturn that I did like a whole lot and love even more now because I've seen some of the Japanese ones was the commercials. Yeah. Their commercials were so fucking crazy and out of control. They gave no fucks at all, and it was a very typical 90s thing where it was just crazy, over the top, balls to the wall type stuff, and I loved it so much.
Can you think of any examples?
I remember that a lot of the specific commercials were actually about the system, and they had montages of the games. One of the ones that I can think of off the top of my head was it was supposed to be like if things were taking place inside of somebody's brain. And, there's all these people that are working inside of there. And as soon as the person is being exposed to stuff inside, being exposed to, like, the Sega Saturn, their brain just starts going ballistic. And they're like, oh my god, it's like a nuclear meltdown. Holy fuck.
I remember that. You know what I mean? That's so funny.
Dude, and, oh my god, I cannot remember his name right now. But he was, like, the main dude who was in all the Sega Saturn commercials in Japan.
Sensoro, yeah.
Dude, his were so amazing. The one where he's doing training and he's running with a big Sega Saturn controller on his back, and then he's like doing these punching combos on it against the buttons and stuff.
He was fucking amazing.
Dude, it was so fucking cool. And the more that you see them, they're more ridiculous and over the top. And it's like, holy fuck, this is so cool. Like, I
crashed through buildings. He's like Superman. I know.
It was amazing. But you want to know what's strange, and it makes me wonder this truly 100%. I wish that I could turn back the hands of time just to alter this one thing and see how it would go. Is if the Sega Saturn had launched with an official Sonic the Hedgehog game, and it was an actual pack-in game, if the tides would have turned a little bit more for Sega in general for that particular generation.
If they had some more RPGs out of the gate, and the problem was the machine was too expensive. I know that, I'm repeating it, but I still remember how frustrated I was. It was this big fucking box of a machine that was fucking a lot of money. And I was like, damn, I can't get into this. Not with what's, out for it. And then all of a sudden, Magic Knight Rail started coming out. Like, all these really cool games started coming out. I'm like, fuck. And I started playing the ROMs, like Guardian Heroes, all that kinds of stuff. And, Panzer Dragoon Saga, fuck, all that.
The day that I got to find out that Die Hard Arcade was on a Sega Saturn, I wanted a Sega Saturn so much because there's this movie theater called Showcase Cinemas, and we would go there because it was the closest big-time theater to us, and we would go there. They had a Die Hard arcade machine in there, and I would play it every single time. They had all these other arcade games there, and I'd play them every so often, but I always played Die Hard arcade at least once, and would always try beating it. As a matter of fact, sometimes I got so good at it, I'd have to quit the game just to go into the movie. And dude, that game, oh my god, it's so awesome, man. It's also known as it's part of the Dynamite Cop series.
Yeah, I know it. I do know it for sure. Yeah.
But it's, dude, that and a game that I'm still missing out of my collection, and eventually will end up finding for a price that doesn't make me want to chop my fucking leg off. In one of the best entries, Saturn Bomberman.
Oh yeah, that's a classic. Rob used to have the multi-tap for that. Yeah, for that. Was there any games on it that were like, whenever you went over to Rob's, that were really like pushing you to just absolutely say fuck it and sell stuff to want to go and get the system? You know, it's one of those things where the very first time I saw Knights playing when I went over there, and I remember his whole family's there playing it. It was really interesting, and they passed me the controller, and it was like an analog controller. I was like, what is this?
And that was different.
That was really, really different. I was like, oh, you control it with this. I'm like, interesting. And it was very, very, it was unique. And you can tell that it felt very refreshing and new and exciting. You know, that kind of feeling that I don't want to say you don't normally get anymore. Now we get, going from PS3 to PS4, you have another controller, you have some, motion control and stuff like that. That's fine, but you don't have that breakthrough. Yeah. Unless you do virtual reality and stuff like that.
And they also dubbed it as the Sega Saturn 3D controller, which made it sound like it was you basically had the future sitting inside your hands, like shitting into your thumbs with amazingness.
Yeah, it was good, and it was like, wow, this is cool. And the game that really made me go, fuck it, I need to get a Sega Saturn was Guardian Heroes. And,
yeah.
I mean, I went over to Rob's, and it was funny because I went over there and there was Rob. Rob was young then, too. Holy shit. Rob was 18. I was 22. I think it was 22, yeah. And so I went over there, we're hanging out, and his brother was over from Japan. He was back over here, and he had one of his friends over that I remember from high school, and I brought my friend Andrew, and... Oh, no, actually, no, that was another time when I brought Andrew. But just this time, it was just me. And I went over, and I had these big beers. And it was funny? I remember that none of them were into, like, drinking. They were kind of like, the good kind of nerdy kids, where I was, like, the nerdy kid who kind of gone rogue. And I was
you were the badass who liked nerdy things.
I really enjoyed, I enjoyed nerdy stuff, but I also enjoyed doing a bit of partying. Absolutely. So I remember showing it to Rob's place, and I had a couple of tall cans of, Canadian beer. It's called Canadian. You've had it,
Oh, yeah.
But very stereotypical. And I just sat there, and they're all playing it, and I cracked this beer, and it's funny. I remember how good I felt. Never mind the beer. But it just felt so great to be surrounded by nerdy people. We're doing such a nerdy thing, and we're so into it. I loved it how they were talking about the storyline as though it was real. And I really enjoyed that aspect of that evening, and I'll never forget how much fun it was. And then more fun was when I kept coming over, and Rob kept unlocking different characters for the arena battles, and we do those every day, and we'd fight the little, I think it's this Nando guy, the little hamster, fighting against this gigantic robot. So you have this little hamster on the screen. He's like a pin drop thing. And it gets this gigantic robot that's the size of the screen, and you beat it. And it was like the coolest shit ever. That was the first time I was like, I need a Saturn. This is great stuff. But I never got one. There wasn't enough of the games to really maybe go, okay, fuck it, I'm doing it. Because Rob just kept bringing this Saturn over to my house. He was like the drug pusher. Like, he just came to my house and we'd do it there. I didn't need
like
one.
He comes over like he's the fucking cartel and shit, and he's just like, I'm gonna make this offer. Like, I would want to see him like with like a briefcase and shit, and it's like a couple bags of cocaine.
He had a briefcase. Because back then he had a real brief. You'd open it up and it was all like the fucking, what do you call it? styrofoam stuff inside.
Well,
Honestly,
see, that's you get rid of all the styrofoam. You have bags of Coke in there, and that's what nestles your Saturn and your controllers and your games in. And then you just throw them to the side. Who the fuck actually wants this 8-ball of Coke? I need to go and play Dragon Force right the fuck now in Virtual Cop.
Yeah, there's another good game, right? Fuck yeah, like
Dude,
yeah.
Oh my god, Virtual Cop. That's my shit right there. I love it.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about. And seeing Virtual, we didn't even say that. Virtual Fighter. Virtual Fighter looked unfucking believable to me back then.
And Virtual Fighter was the start.
Yes.
For many people of seeing what we could dub as like realistic fighting games. You know,
well,
and
yeah,
it was amazing.
Well, the thing is, what was like for Sega, Virtual Fighter became a benchmark. It didn't even matter if the game was any good. It was a benchmark of graphics in a way that, and the game was pretty okay. It got a lot better as it went along, but not from like the first one. So the first one you look at, and you're like, oh, that's interesting, 3D characters, and all of a sudden you're playing it at home. You're like, oh, okay, and you were basically whenever you'd see a Virtual Fighter game in the arcade, you're like, oh, that's the next Sega machine's going to look like that, and it did.
Yep.
And so when you saw Virtual Fighter 2 on, let's say Saturn, you're like, holy shit.
The difference between Virtual Fighter 1 and 2 is like night and day.
Oh god,
there's such a fucking contrast, because it's strange, at least modernly, to see a big time leap in games nowadays. But back then, you saw Virtual Fighter 2, or Virtual Fighter, which, you could play it on the Genesis, which, that was 2D sprites, but you could also play it on the 32X. Yeah. Then you saw Virtual Fighter 2 on the Sega Saturn, and you were like, yeah, this kind of just cements the fact that the 32X was fucking garbage, because this is true 32-bit power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, one of the other big series on there, Panzer Dragoon, that trilogy.
Yeah, and those are some of the games I saw Rob's too, and it was like, this is really cool.
Dude, and on-rail games are always fun, but an on-rail game where I'm flying around as a dragon, shooting other monsters and stuff, and then to cap off the trilogy, you turn this on-rail game into an RPG. Holy fuck, thank you. Like, that's the kind of thing, like, you deserve a reach around and a taco. Like, that's just great.
It was very cool. It was a very interesting era of the Sega Saturn. I got to see it from afar, and because it was Rob's, but I did enjoy a lot of my time with it. It still wasn't the Genesis to me, and nothing would be right again till the Dreamcast, and that's what we got next. And
Aaron, we could actually jump on into the Dreamcast, which is still thinking, and I'm still thinking that we need to have a lot more HD versions of the Dreamcast library, because man, do I love the Dreamcast.
I love it too, and it was one of those feelings that it felt everybody been promising you the arcade experience at home, and they were delivering to certain degrees, but the Dreamcast was like, hey, guess what? This is the arcade game. The first time you played Soul Calibur or Power Stone, and then you went to the arcade, you're like, well, it's the exact same game. I can't believe it. And Dude. It was like, yeah, you'd finally, and that is such a huge thing, finally, arcade games or home games are getting better than arcade games. We hit that, that moment.
You've got to do it like you're The Rock. You have to be like, finally, the arcade games have finally come home.
That's awesome,
dude. How about this? What was your very, very first experience with the Dreamcast?
Very cool summer. I just graduated film school. I was getting my resume, my portfolio together to get a job, and Rob went to Japan with his parents. He went over just to Japan to visit his brother over there, and so he came back, and what was awesome is he came over with a fucking bag of goodies for me. He's like, "Oh, here's Ys 5," and I'm like, "On the Super Famicom? Oh my god!" And he brought me all these things back from Japan, and it just blew my mind. And he's like, also, I got something else. I'm like, what else you got? He's like, I'm going to go bring it this evening and we're going to play it. I'm like, what are we going to play? He's like, I got a Dreamcast. I'm like, a Japanese Dreamcast? He's like, yeah. He goes, and Power Stone. I'm like, are you serious? I'm like, you're kidding me. He's like, no. He's like, and he went and grabbed it, brought it in this big case, opened it up again. His family was big for these cases. It was hilarious. But they really wanted to protect their investments. And he had all taken care of. And we played it. And I could not believe I was playing. I know it sounds so fucking funny now, but I was playing Power Stone at home. And we had a great time. And Rob was really cool. He said, you know what? I'm going to leave this here for you for the night. You can have it for tomorrow. And I got to pick it up because I got to bring it back because it was part of his brother's too. I'm like, yeah, no problem. And I'll never forget. So Rob left that night. We had some beers and played Power Stone until the wee hours of the morning. I got up the next morning and it was a beautiful summer morning. I'll never forget. The sun is shining. It's beautiful outside. What a day to go outside. I went straight to the basement, closed all the fucking blinds, and Power Stoned it up for the day. I unlocked everything that day. I just did everything in the game. From when Rob came back that evening, I basically unlocked everything. And I was quite good at the game then, too. So I just destroyed him in versus mode.
That poor bastard. He's all like, all right, everything's unlocked. I can't wait to get... Oh, my God, I'm being raped. I'm being raped right now.
It was fun. When I was in my heydays of Power Stone, I was good. I'd have to practice up again. I remember me and you played, I think, down at Portland, and I was like, I couldn't even remember the game. I'm like, oh yeah, I could jump on the post and swing around and
dude, that was the same way for me. Like I got lucky because you're actually quite good at fighting games, and I ended up winning that. Though you ended up beating the shit out of me in all the other fucking fighting games that we had played. We also had played.
We were playing like it was like SNK versus Capcom.
Yeah, that, man, you put my day up in that game.
Hey, don't worry. You put up a bit of a challenge, but what? Oh my God. Talk about walking over somebody. He put his quarter in, and I was just like, is this guy for real? He had absolutely nothing. I just annihilated him. I annihilated him like 4 games in a row. I'm like, hey, look at this. I'm not even looking. I was doing the stuff I used to do to Rob. It was so funny.
that poor Australian bastard.
I enjoyed that. I was like, man, you have no game. You have none at all. And,
you lack game, unfucking fortunately.
Yeah.
And you know what? And speaking of fighting games, that is one thing the Dreamcast has in spades is fighting games out the ass. And I'm talking picture perfect conversions in every single way. Absolutely amazing. From the ones that are very commonly known, like the Street Fighters and the Soul Caliburs and shit, to stuff like Last Blade 2 and Mark of the Wolves and shit. Like these
Mark
games
of the Wolves. Oh my God.
So fucking amazing. Like between Capcom and SNK, you didn't need anything else. They had that shit locked down, and oh my God, it was.
Hey,
good stuff.
I got to tell you this. I had a little apartment at the time, and I had my Dreamcast, and my mom came to stay with me for a couple of days to help me kind of like move in and get like settled in and all that. Because help me clean basically a lot of it. But it was so fun. I'm playing Mark of the Wolves in the other room, and I'm not thinking anything. I'm playing Terry Bogard. I'm doing some moves, and she comes in. She's like in the kitchen. She comes in. She's like, "Oh my God, what is with the swearing in this video game you're playing?" I said, there's no swearing. What are you talking about? I'm playing a fighting game. And she's like, yeah, one of the characters keeps saying, fuck you. I'm like, what? And fuck me, man. Like when you do like a power wave thing, you go, fuck you. Fuck you. And you do say it. It sounds like I totally got it after that. And once you hear it, you'll never unhear it ever again. And I was like, oh, fuck, that's hilarious. Good job, Mom. You picked up on that. That's made for a hilarious day, So I made sure I did tons of those. Every time I play, I cranked up the stereo even more. But yeah, sorry, I had to. That's a weird memory. I always thought.
See, and that's some of the shit that I love is whenever they keep like the Japanese dialogue in some of the games, or they just do like a piss poor translation where it doesn't quite sound right, so it comes through as something else. That shit's hilarious, especially when you're spamming the move over and over again. Somebody's in the next room, like, and all you hear is "fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you," and it's like, what the hell's going on?
What the hell's going on? I need to be playing that game, or
Dude,
man, somebody's really insulting him over and over again.
Dreamcast, though, man. The very first time I had seen it in person, the very first time was in EB Games in Ross Park Mall, and I went there, and this was the mall because I was a fucking mall rat. That's where I hung out with all my friends, and we would run around and just cause mischief and shit. So. Yeah. I go into EB Games, and I had found out, everybody was like, oh, did you hear? The Dreamcast is there. And I was like, all right. So we go down this big-ass group. Naturally, I'm the leader of the fucking pack of this group. And walk in, and lo and behold, there's the Dreamcast with a small line of people. And it was that little stand-up one with two controllers sticking out of it.
Oh, I know it well. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So... I go and I get in line, and I mean, like, I forget how many people I brought in with me, but we filled the fucking store, and everybody starts looking around at stuff, and I'm just waiting in line, and I'm looking over everybody's shoulders, and it was Sonic Adventure that was being played, and I felt like I was like in a fucking video game utopia. It's like I cannot believe I'm looking at this. This is blowing my mind. Sonic, to begin with, is in 3D. The last time I felt this was with Super Mario 64.
Yeah.
And you're seeing Sonic, and it's the very first stage because it's just a demo, but you see Sonic running along that pier that's being broken apart with that big-ass fucking
whale.
Killer whale that's ripping up everything, and he's just jumping and flying through the air, and I was like, holy fuck. It blew my mind. And it was like experiencing blast processing in my pants.
I liked your story. It really summed up that excitement.
Dude,
that
it was
when you first saw it. Yeah,
because again, for a lot of people, it's hard to experience that because look what games are like right now. But the transition from console to console back then was such big, great leaps. And that was just it was mind boggling and. Just real quick to add on to that, the first time I got my Dreamcast was it was the same exact month that it came out in the local video game store that I ended up becoming an assistant manager at like a couple years later. I had entered a raffle and I was the winner of a Sega Dreamcast in one game.
Oh my god.
And they had sold out of everything. They had sold out of Sonic. I wanted Sonic Adventure because I had seen it so many times. They didn't have it, so I went and I got the second best thing, and it was House of the Dead 2. And then I got my I had some money and I bought the gun, which we unfortunately here in the States and stuff we didn't get the official gun like they had over in Europe. So got a good enough gun and. Holy fuck, that was great times right there. But that was my first experience with the Dreamcast.
It's funny, as soon as you said EB, I was like, wait a second. That was my first experience. Like, my first time really playing it was when Rob brought it back from Japan. But because I graduated film school, we'd gone to Las Vegas just for a couple of days to celebrate. And so we were down there. And I went through an EB, by an EB Games. And this is how weird, even you remember, this was like a weird time in gaming when stuff like this would happen. You'd never see this again. But there was a guy standing outside of EB Games, and he had brought his personal Japanese, Dreamcast to the store. And they said, yeah, you can demo it.
Dude, that is cool.
But it's so weird. So he was just like hanging out. It's like, hey, how you doing? He was like the friendliest guy ever. I'm like, oh, good. And he's like, I said, oh my God. I said, is it the Dreamcast? He's like, yeah. He goes, and he's telling me how he bought it, he imported it, blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, give it a shot. And, and I was just experiencing like Blue Stinger, and I was like, wow. It was like, oh my God, it's Resident Evil, but with arcade graphics, like real 3D arcade graphics. There's like, this is fucking me up. This is really fucking me up. It was something the hell else. And
and you know what, the idea, like the idea that somebody brings that along just so that everybody else can experience it, that's
pretty awesome.
That is like, that's one of those special moments, you know, that you got to remember, because the Dreamcast came out in the very late 90s, and you know, now all the way up until now, you get to remember that, and I think that's cool as shit, dude. You know, what's fucked up for me was the one of the first times I got to see the Dreamcast in person outside of EB was one of my good friends. His cousin had it, and his cousin was one of those people that would buy stuff basically just to show off that he had it. And he had a Japanese Dreamcast, and he had Sonic Adventure, and he had oh man, I cannot remember what the hell the game is called, but it sucks real fucking bad. It was one of the launch games for it.
What kind of launch game was it? What kind of game?
Oh man, oh my god, why can't I fucking remember the name?
Sega Rally? Was it like
No. Sega Rally is amazing.
Yeah,
I want to say it was kind of like an RPG sim game. For a life of me, I cannot remember, but he had that game, and he wouldn't let us actually play any of the games. He wouldn't even let us walk near it. He was like, "Oh, you can just stand there and you can watch, but you can't actually touch it." And then he'd sit there and play it, and I just remember thinking in the back of my head, I want to take a brick to this motherfucker's head.
Oh, shit.
Because he was just, like, being a jerk. I'm like, dude, why would you invite people down to not play something? Like, all you did was just to fucking stroke your ego and shit. Yeah. But, you know, enough of the negative stuff. Let's get down to brass tacks and talk about some fucking games for this beast.
God. There's so many. The only problem, we're already an hour and 20 minutes into this podcast. How about we both pick a couple of games each that are fucking highlight moments? Jesus. I'll just say Phantasy Star Online, Skies of Arcadia, you know, Soul Calibur. Like, the list goes on and on. Go for it. You go. Well, I'm thinking.
All right, you pick those ones. I will, and we already talked about some of the other titles. So titles we haven't brought up. It'd be absolute heresy if I did not mention the mighty Shenmue.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely.
Because Shenmue always and Shenmue is just amazing. Let's see. Grandia 2, because you had mentioned Skies of Arcadia. I actually prefer Skies of Arcadia over it, but it's oh my god, Grandia 2 is absolutely fantastic and one of the best games, you know, on the system. And I guess I'll cap it off with I always forget how you say it, but Ikaruga.
Oh yeah, Ikaruga is a wonderful game. Wonderful.
Dude, that and I mean I played it more on GameCube because that's a physical copy I own, but I got to play that properly at a video game convention with an LCD TV turned vertically, and that was some shit right there.
Wow, that's cool.
But it was
Marvel versus Capcom 2. Yep. Crazy Taxi.
Dude, we got the official third Street Fighter thanks to the thanks to the Dreamcast, which that was one of the only places that you could see that on there. And I always thought that was kind of badass.
Resident Evil Code Veronica.
Oh, dude, yeah, Code Veronica, bar none, was one of the best things on there. I still remember the first time seeing it. I was like, oh my god, everything's in 3D, and I felt like I was shitting myself. Hell, a game that kind of was ahead of its time in terms of art style, but Jet Set Radio.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I was just about to say that one too. I love that game.
Well, for us it was Jet Grind Radio, but then it became Jet Set Radio Future and all that shit. But the system was a good way for Sega to leave the hardware market, because it was, for the short amount of time that it was out, it was nothing but awesome stuff the entire time. I know. It really was. It was really sad in the end when it was like, when they said, yeah, we're basically packing up. This is our last console and we're going to become a software only company. I was like, what? I knew the writing was on the wall. I saw it. That was the beginning of the end for me. I knew it. I'm like, and then all of a sudden you start having like Yu Suzuki and Yuji Naka, leaving. I'm like, oh my god, the heart and soul of these companies, they're gone. I'm like, like the whole Bernie Stoller. Remember Bernie Stoller? Oh, jeez, that guy
That was the fucking that was all the bomb. I remember that.
And it is kind of sad to go and think about, but the nice thing is that we started seeing things like Sonic show up in a game with Mario, which we would have never seen prior.
Which was great, but at the same time, it just meant that something was wrong with Sega.
Yeah, it definitely did. But the nice thing about it is they have an absolutely amazing legacy whenever it comes to gaming, because as far as like first party goes, because to this day, even though Sega's a third party company, to this day I always end up viewing them as a first party company. Like they put out so damn many franchises and individual titles that were daring, that broke the mold, that started genres. They were innovators. They were really pushing for online gaming for the longest time. They were pushing for having arcade perfect ports of games. And it was just absolutely awesome company. And it's kind of cool that we got to talk about each generation of their systems throughout the years.
It really was a wonderful time, and it's really sad. I always get mad because I'm sad. I'm upset. I'm sad. God damn it! I wish we could go back to the golden era, and I don't mean go back in time. I mean like for them to have enough money and to make some sequels to some of their old classic franchises, and for people to give a fuck to buy them. Yeah, having all those equations is never going to happen, and we all know it.
And it is unfortunate because there's a lot of things that we're always saying, we wish this was getting released and that was getting released, or this was getting ported, or this was getting a sequel or a remake, or, but luckily we've at least got catalogs and memories and even back catalogs of games that we will end up playing or playing back through again, because that's what we have right now. I hope that gets better in the future, because I want them to live on. I want these franchises to live on. I want them, I want more Shining Force and Phantasy Star games. I want a third Shenmue game. I want another Skies of Arcadia. I want more Streets of Rage. I want more Shinobi games. There's just so damn many, and all we can do is hope and support.
That's really it, and they own Atlas now, which is really an unusual thing, isn't it?
It is. It's kind of weird to think about that they're under one house. But, I typically end up forgetting about the fact that them and Sammy are still together as one big company. And Sammy's one of the main companies that's putting out shit like Guilty Gear, for example. And, I would like to see Sega just say, hey, Atlas, why don't you go and translate a bunch of these games that we've never done shit all with? Or why don't you port some of these games for modern gen systems so that these can live on, so that fans, like new generations, can understand why the past generations were making such a big fuss.
Absolutely, yeah, man. It's so funny. It's sad that we had to skip through the Dreamcast, because we could have spent a lot of time just in the Dreamcast alone. Maybe we'll come back. Maybe let's come back and do another Dreamcast episode.
I was gonna say we could probably, to be honest, certain systems are awesome enough that you're able to dedicate an entire episode to. So who knows?
I know you could get into the nitty gritty of everything. Code Veronica, the first night you played that, and it was weird. And, that was just such a big fucking deal game. Such a big deal. I sucked at it. That game kicked my ass. But it was a big deal game. It was so fucking fantastic at the time. So, yeah, but geez, I think the audience, they absolutely know Sega and love Sega, I think, as much as we did. And it's just a little bit of a trip through memory lane for us. I'm sure you guys felt the same way.
I think a lot of people out there listening, especially if you've been around, gaming as long as we have, or even if you're new to gaming, maybe this will get you interested in some of that past stuff. Or for a lot of you out there, you're just nodding in agreement like, damn, I remember some of that shit too. So hopefully you all enjoy this, because it's Sega, and it's totally worth going and talking about, because it's fucking Sega, and I don't give a shit. Even if they're a dumbass company right now, they're still awesome. I just want to knock them over the head and put common sense back in there.
Yeah, that's really it. And Yeah, oh my god, another Shinobi game, another Alice Kid game, another Fantasy Zone game. Like, oh my god. No,
Yep.
we're not going to have any of it. So don't worry about it. It's a sad end to a great legacy, and that's what Sega will be known for, its legacy. That's
But
something
there is always that hopeful future.
there's always a bit of hope. There's
Yeah.
always a bit of hope, but
Always got to have some hope. So, would you like to wrap this up?
yeah, I don't know how to wrap. Didn't we have a line how we got out of this?
Let's see.
I can't remember.
We
I can't
don't. We could I noticed that we always come to this
ending. And we're always really good, and then we come to the ending and we're like, "Oh, isn't this awkward?"
Oh yeah, how do you end it? And see, on both of our shows, we do have little ending lines because that's an easy way to be like, all right, that's the credit roll right there, bam, boom.
Yeah, yeah. We always just fucking ritter on like old ladies at the end here. I don't know. So that's our talk about Sega. Yeah, it was a good time. It was a good time to be there. It was a good time to play the games, and now it's all over. Just like the podcast.
How about this? I hope you all enjoyed the podcast and tried not to look up any really bad fanfic about Sonic the Hedgehog because there's lots of it. Especially.
Oh shit! I already did. I'm looking at it. I'm reading it.
I told you you didn't want to look up the ones where the characters are pregnant with one another. Then eventually they just shit them out because the people don't know that birthing canals and shit. But whatever.
I'm fully erect right now. I thank you for this.
It's okay. Don't worry. I know what I'm going to be doing later on this evening, and so does everybody else.
It's a gift. It's a curse. And with that, guys, see you later.
Bye.
Bye.